Privyet, Shalom, Salut to le monde, and welcome, to the continuation of the Garden of Gethsemane, Mark 14, 48 to 52, exposing the neo-pagan claim that Christ was a child trafficking, drug dealing pedophile. I guess that's the claim. The pagans are kind of projecting their gods and their mythology onto Christ. There is nothing more opposite to paganism than the Bible, than Christianity, and even the Old Testament Israel. So let's go through this. We're going to continue now breaking down the words in Mark 14. In our last video, we went through showing examples on how one word can be taken completely out of context, like, was Jesus a carpenter? There is actually no text in the Bible that says he was a carpenter. He was a builder of some sort, a tradesman, a craftsman, an artisan, an artificer, something like this. We don't know. It's just the Greek word tekton. And it's not until you add something to that word and add context to something does the situation or the text reveal itself and what it's actually talking about. Right, so we went over tekton, and statistically, Christ would have been a stonemason, right? If he was, that's probably the number one trade in that region at that time. He's only a carpenter based upon 1600s Britain, when the King James Bible was translated, and a lot of the King James Bible translation choices it's just what has kind of passed, transitioned over as Britain was the dominant empire. The King James Bible 1611, at least revised, was the government state issued Bible. So it's not shouldn't surprise us that the state issued Bible, right, the government Bible became whatever the government of Britain said at that time, has kind of become the standard of today. All right, so a lie will get halfway around the world while the truth is putting on its shoes. That is true for so many things. And the word tekton is one. Everyone believes Christ was a carpenter. And now a lot of people are pushing this Ammon Hillman, this Christ was trafficking children. Anyways, we gave the word, we went over context is key, context of a word, how one word can mean multiple different things, and depending on the context you're in, the situation you're in, that word, the meaning can change just instantly. So what the pagans are doing in their debating skills, or their tactics for debating, is we're going to take this word when it's used in this scenario and now apply it to this scenario. And we drew the analogy that it would be like a father at a diner ordering Coke for his family, and then 100 years later in the future sometime, people look back and go, do you see, it was totally normal in America in the 21st century, 20th century, for a father to order cocaine for his entire family. See, the text says he ordered Coke. It's like, well, how do you know that? Well, because in this text, a police officer arrested a guy for having Coke. And anyone living in our time would know this is ridiculous. He's obviously ordered Coca-Cola. He ordered something to drink for his family. He didn't order cocaine. So we went over this example. You guys can always go back and watch the last video. Later, we're going to talk about the Hellenistic worldview, Hellenism, what Hellenism really was, and why would pagan nationalists, why would neo-Nazi pagans be wanting to go back to a system that would have wiped out their paganism? Like people have, I don't know if these pagans have actually read history, because it's just like all the pagan world was one nation conquering another, wiping out another, replacing their gods, humiliating their gods, and anyone claiming to be like a Brittonic, like, I go back to the old Celtic Brittonic traditions. Like the Druids were wiped out. The Druids Back then, the Scandinavians and the Celtic tribes, the Brythonic tribes, they were they had a druid class that everything was passed down orally, and then when the Romans were coming, uh, they all got wiped out, and like majority of their traditions are long gone, only maybe preserved by what the Christian monks wrote down. And again, the Christians will get blamed for uh, you know, surviving. They'll get blamed for the fall of the Roman Empire. They're not thanked for allowing the nations to rise, recording the customs and traditions of the local people. Nothing like that. You should read how the Romans wrote about the Britons and the things that they said about them. And so the pagan world is just really just it's nonstop infighting, conquering, slaughtering, genocide, extermination. You know, so we're going to talk about the world of Hellenism and Alexander the Great and his race mixing strategy to breed the nations out and create a master race of Greco-Persians. And the Romans were doing the exact same thing. So don't let pagan neo-Nazis and nationalists point at how great Rome was and how great Greece was, because Rome and Greece did not care. They cared, are you a citizen of our empire? That's why Jews could be Romans, Egyptians could be Romans, or Egyptians could be Greeks. Anyone could. You just had to embrace their ideology, embrace Hellenism, embrace Romanism. No different than the Jewish Pharisees. Anyone could be a Jew. You just convert to the ideology. It's the age of ideologies. You just choose which one you want and you convert to it. So nationalism is to do with your extended family. It's to do with preserving the culture that came from your ancestors, right? Not joining a hodgepodge like the Greeks or the Romans or whatever. And it was the Jews in antiquity, when Hellenism was spreading and they're building their gymnasiums, their sports theaters, and encouraging homosexuality and pederasty, sex with children, and their worship of Dionysus and drugs and drinking and this whole Greek way of life. And that's not to say every Greek was like that, but to say it was very normal. Their gods promoted this, right? So not only do we have Greek laws and the way their gods behaved embedded in their mythology legally, religion, through law, and through philosophy. Guys, this is Hellenism, okay? That's not to say that there weren't amazing Greeks, but a lot of the Greeks, anyone who rebelled against the Greek system, rebelled against the gods or anything, they were killed. A lot of the philosophers, like Plato, is actually a pretty good guy. He's just recording what other people are saying and doing. And at the end, when he's writing the Republic, he removes a lot of the pagan degeneracy. So it's not to say there aren't great Greeks, there aren't great Greek writers or anything like that. It's just to put things into context with what Christianity actually gave to Europe, right? And what was actually normal in the Hellenistic and Roman worlds. And to not allow European nationalists claiming that they're the greatest race in the world, failing to recognize how everything comes from the East. Even us, our ancestry comes from the Eastern world, right? So the ancient Greeks would never have insulted Egyptians or even the Babylonians, to whom they got so much of their culture from, So we're going to talk about the Maccabean revolt and how the Jews were the ones who nationalized against the globalizing homosexual Europeans, right? Oy vey. All right, so then we're going to talk about the spiritual nomads, the guys on the internet that don't really have any views. Their view is really, they're just united in the destruction of Christianity, the destruction of what once held the West together, what gave us such a high standard of morality that has just completely fallen away. As you could say, Judeo-Freemasonry has just took over Europe and America, and our churches have just been completely Gnosticized. Like, I really believe modern Christianity is just Gnosticism. I don't view. Again, we teach monotheism here, strict monotheism. And so, anyways, we're going to talk about the spiritual nomad, go over their tactics, how they do things, and how they're trying to prevent us from building a house, building something, as the barbarians are coming, as the storm is coming. The harder we try to, you know, rally the people, like, we need something to rally behind, and and doubt and infighting is just not the way to go. And I tried to make peace with the pagans. I really did. And I realized there is no peace with paganism. I tried to say we need to put our differences aside and actually work as a team. You can't. They are aggressive. They are extremely degenerate. Even my time in the Nationalist Party back in Quebec, the Christian side and the atheist side, believe it or not, were okay. The atheist, and you know, like, we could unite, say, like Antifa. There's a fight with Antifa. There's a rally going on. The three of us can unite as nationalists fighting for our country. But the pagans in particular, there was no rationalizing with them. I find paganism, earth worship, Mother Nature, they're very into drugs and psychedelics and getting drunk and sexual degeneracy. My feeling wasn't that they're angry at what the Jews are doing, and the Freemasons and all this, the elites are doing to us. They weren't so much angry that about what they were doing, is they were more jealous that they want to be the ones doing it. They want to be the ones running the banks. And it was just really a fight over leadership. And a lot of it just had to do, and the pagan guys were always drunk, always fighting, always violent. And you couldn't organize these guys to do anything. Maybe you could say in a brawl with Antifa, they're okay. But that's like a last resort. Do you know what I mean? If we can solve the problem peacefully, solve the problem through debate, through reason, through logic, what's good and what's best for the nation, that's always the first path you need to take. And violence should always be the last resort. But these pagan guys, I'm just saying, in our group, my experience, I'm not to say all of them were like this, but the bulk of these guys, you know, you can even look at like the Aryan Brotherhood, the Aryan Knights. There's so many white nationalist groups that are all affiliated with organized crime. And these people end up serving the opposite. They don't give the image. They're white supremacists instead of, if you're, like, I'm a nationalist. I'm all for fighting for my country and my race and my people. But in order to do that, you, especially as white people with the brainwashing that's gone on, you need to be a nationalist for all people and all races. You need to be a white nationalist. You actually need to defend Nigeria. Nigeria is for Nigerians. Uganda is for Uganda. You know, Germany is for Germans. Right? It's about, this is a big world, and everyone can have a piece. And if you want to be part of a race mixing community, that should be allowed too. Go nuts. This is where you can go do that. You shouldn't, but you can't hate people for wanting to be with their own, or for wanting, there's nothing wrong with that. But a lot of these pagan groups, I don't know if they're controlled opposition, what their job is, but they're doing a really terrible job presenting such a negative image of European culture and the European people. And that's why I'm done with these pagans. Let's just the gloves are off, and let's go through the sources, you know. And there's no peace, in my opinion, there is no peace with pagans. They want to be violent degenerates, all in the name of earth worship and ancestor worship. And I don't even know what to say to that. You know, the worship of men, the worship of material. And the Christian mind is just not like that. We are our minds are more spiritual. We're focused on the spiritual realm, the spiritual world, improving ourselves, not letting the material world enslave us. We want to master our senses and resist temptation over the material world. We don't want to be slaves to matter. We want to be the masters of matter. So anyways, we're going to go over that more with the spiritual nomad. And these guys, again, all they're really doing is they're throwing rocks at us. They don't really believe in anything, or they don't even know their beliefs. You know, like, really talk to pagans about their mythology. They don't really know what they're talking about. Okay, and that's going to tie into the fall of the West. And this is going to be a pretty frightening, I would say, discussion. Because we're like 80-90% through the curses of Moses. And it's those last 20 to 10% that's just going to destroy us. And this is, again, it all kind of ties together, and why the pagan movement is so dangerous, because there is no uniting with them. There is no, and right now a house divided against itself cannot stand. And when, again, I was willing to make peace with the pagans. I wanted us to work together and say, we need to put our differences aside. You can go back through all my videos, all of them. Now it's like, okay, there is just no peace with these people. Okay? There is just no peace. So the thing is divided we fall, divided we are conquered. And we're just not in a position to do that. And so we're going to go over the curses of Moses, and how that by falling away from God is what's bringing down our destruction. And to follow God is really just to be a moral person. Don't lie, don't steal, don't cheat on your wife, don't commit murder. It's very basic stuff. But as people fall away from God, hope in the afterlife, fear of God is truly the beginning of knowledge, the beginning of wisdom. Looking at our world and going, you know, someone built this place. Matter doesn't just appear, especially not in organized fashion. You know, biology, literally the laws of biology, life can only come from pre-existing life. Someone built this place. There is a programmer. And your job is to figure out, who is this programmer and why am I here? And when you go against this programmer, everything falls apart. Okay, when you go against nature, when you go against what is right, everything falls apart. And that's exactly what we're dealing with right now in the Western world. And we're going to go over that point form, curses of Moses. When Moses said that if you guys disobey God, and really disobey God, understand that to disobey God is to treat each other like garbage. It's to lie to each other, betray each other. Divorce rates, I think, are over 50%. The sexual degeneracy that's out there it's like Sodom and Gomorrah on steroids. You know, we are a degenerate generation. And I don't know how to come back from it. And it's global, guys. It's not just, it's with the internet, it's a global phenomenon. It's not just the Western world. It's here where I live too, in Eastern Europe. It's everywhere, right? So we're battling the drug, the sex culture. It's like they're normalizing everything down to pedophilia. We're living in dangerous times. It's Weimar Germany all over again. All right, so we're going to cover that. And how at the end of the day, it's going to just lead to slavery. It's going to lead to bondage, and that's what the Bible is trying to. The imagery in the Bible is the promised land is for mature people who can take care of themselves, take care of their children. They don't need the court systems to sue each other and all that stuff. They solve their problems on their own. and they are responsible people. They tell the truth for the most part. They're not sexual deviants. They raise their family. They raise their children. They're honest, hardworking people. And the moment you stray away from that, and that now it comes down to the cycle of time, the cycle of history, that once you create this prosperous environment, you then are now going to have a spoiled generation of children. And that if the parents fail to drill in hard work ethics, good morals, good values, and not to just, let the plant, you can kill a plant by giving it not enough water and then too much water. And you have to find that happy balance when you're tending a garden, not to kill your plants with too much love and then kill them with not enough love. You have to find that happy middle, that balance, which is very tricky. And once a civilization hits this point of absolute prosperity, it's just self-destruction at that point. It doesn't matter if it was Russia before the fall, before the communists took over. The Russian elites were out of control. They were degenerates in the highest. What we're seeing now in the United States is the exact same thing. And all of us are like, we want to take credit for what our ancestors did, but do we deserve the country they built for us? Do we? I don't think we do. I don't think we do. Okay? And so that's when God blesses you, if you don't maintain the garden, the blessing, and you're not pulling out the weeds, and the weeds take over, well, bondage, God is going to bring judgment upon you, bondage upon you, and it's back to Egypt you go. And that's communism. That's what the Egyptian system represents. Egypt is bondage, okay? And you are no longer a people who can rule themselves. You're a bunch of spoiled, degenerate, rotten children who need to be punished. And so God is going to give your blessing to another people, use another people to come in and destroy you. And right now, we're over $30 trillion in debt in the West. The world hates us. And that's it. Everything, Moses, Proverbs, that they said, that the Bible says is coming true upon us. So you can deny it all you want, but if it's happening, it's happening. Okay, so that's where we're heading. All right, so let's get to it. Sorry, that was kind of a long intro, but let's just get to the Garden of Gethsemane. And what we're going to do is we're going to define what we're talking about. So again, these are the words in question. And so what we're going to have is, I'm going to read the whole thing in a second. We're just going to look at the three words first. A thief, which is lestes. This is the word we're going to talk about in this video. And then we're going to go to a young man in the next one, neaniskos, this one right here. And spoiler, it's not a little boy. It's really a man in his prime. Okay, I'm no longer a neaniskos. So it's generally someone under 40, okay, 18 to 30-year-old. But if you look young enough, if you're healthy enough, you could definitely be classified as a neaniskos. It's not necessarily an age. It's more where you are physically. What do you look like? Okay, we're going to see some examples. And then we're going to go over the word sindon. And sindon is, spoiler, it just means linen. All right. First, before we get into this, let's watch the video of Amon Hillman. Let him explain to you a little bit, and then we'll critique what he says, and then we'll just get into it. So let's watch.
It's called being a lestes.
What is a lestes?
He was crucified between two of these. A lestes is defined, and I've got it on the next, let's see. Oh, here, look, this follows my presentation. So this is what the boy that was with Jesus, this is what he was with him doing. He's following him. Notice they use this term sunakuletho.
And
right?
Where do you get this from? This image?
Thank you to the Victorians from Oxford, who have given us this wonderful, fantastic lexicon of ancient Greek.
Okay.
1850s.
Okay.
After that book that you just had was...
Oh, okay.
was written.
Okay.
And here it is. And notice that it's using soldiers. It's using terms for soldiers and slaves, right? So this kid is not just hanging out with Jesus, right? People have tried to explain this for a while. What was the kid doing with Jesus, right? Okay. Anyway, let's go on to the next one.
All right. So a couple things. Now, number one, and I'm gonna show you guys this a lot when we're going over Hellenism and life in the Greek world, because a lot of he kind of praised the Victorian era, and I'm gonna say the Victorian era was very bad. I don't know what their reasons were, but we're going to go over some examples of sanitization, which we already did in another video, but I'd like to go over more examples just to show you how when you're reading Plato or when you're reading ancient Greek or ancient Roman stuff that's been translated, manuscripts that are now in our modern language, there was a serious sanitization done to clean out certain stories. And we'll go over one, like, it's pretty bad. Like, in one version of Herodotus, Herodotus is talking about how the Greeks, it's written in English like, well, the Greeks taught the Persians unnatural vices. It's translated like that. They taught them unnatural vices. But when you go to the Greek, it literally says having sex, intercourse with little boys. So there's a big difference between saying unnatural vices. So you, as the English reader, you don't know what that means. What's an unnatural vice? It's not specific. But what it actually says in the Greek is they taught the Persians intercourse with little boys between the ages of 7 and 14. That changes the story, you see. So we're going to go over like that example, for instance, in Herodotus. And so he's praising the Victorian era, people. And like, I don't know why they sanitized them. I don't know if it was to hide what the pagans were. Is it to lie to the people about how bad the pagans actually were, how bad the Greeks actually were? Or is it because they were trying to protect their people? I don't, it's just too graphic. The Christians here won't be able to handle this kind of smut, this kind of degeneracy. I don't know what their reasoning was for why they sanitized all the pagan sources so much, but we're going to go over what it says, okay? So I don't know why he's praising that. And then you'll notice what this guy does. I mean, he just quickly jumped to the next one. Let's go to the next one. Let's not talk about lestes. It means soldier. It means slave, I think is what he said. It's not what it means. It doesn't mean soldier. It doesn't mean slave. A soldier or a slave can be a leste, but a leste isn't necessarily a soldier or a slave. That's not what the word means, okay? That's like anyone can be a criminal, right? It's to say, anyways, we're going to go over some examples about that. Also, what he likes to do, you'll notice, is he'll mention other Greek words and completely just go off. We're here talking about this word leste, but then he mentions two completely different words, and then now he's going to do that over and over again. And those words have actually nothing to do with what we're talking about. They're just a distraction to send you in another direction and somehow put two things together that have nothing to do with each other. Anyways, it'll make more sense later. So we're going to talk about right now just this word thief, leste. And thief is not a good translation. It's kind of like carpenter. Carpenter was not a good translation. That's just what the translators felt like doing. This should be maybe more criminal. Criminal maybe would be better than a thief in this context, okay? A thief is a criminal, but a terrorist is a criminal. A drug dealer is a criminal. Criminal is more of just a more broad, a leste doesn't have to be a thief. We're going to see that. A leste is not a thief. Thieving can be part of being a leste. So I have no idea why the translators decided to write a thief. Jesus was not crucified between two thieves. He was crucified between two terrorists, insurrectionists. Okay? So, let's talk about that. So the word leste is actually 20 times is used in the Septuagint and Textus Receptus together. So in the Greek Bible, the complete Greek Bible, Old Testament, New Testament, it appears 30 times, and every time it is translated as either robbers or thieves. Okay, so this is the apostolic Bible using the Greek Septuagint. Okay, so I'm going to be quoting from the King James Bible. Okay, and so now we're looking at the bigger context of Mark 14, 48, 50 to 52. We're going a little bit before and a little bit after. Okay, so what's happening in this story is Christ is about to be arrested. And Judas is about to betray him, okay? And notice who's doing it. It's the chief priests, scribes, and the elders. So we've got the Pharisees, the people pushing the Talmudic law, that are now in line with the priests and the scribes, okay? The writers, the lawyers, the administrative branch of the country. And Judas is going to betray him. Very fitting, very good story in the sense that it's very realistic. It's generally, I think what God is trying to illustrate to us in this story is that your end will come from within. It's no different than the United States today. No one could take out the USA. No one could do it from the outside. I would say the same about the Soviet Union. I don't believe anyone could have taken the Soviet Union down from the outside at one point. The destruction had to have come from within. That's not to say that in World War II, the Soviets were defeated. The Soviets were done. The Germans had the Soviet Union completely destroyed. If it wasn't for the Americans resupplying them with hundreds of billions of dollars worth of equipment, it would have been just game over, right? It was the Americans who actually saved communism, saved the Soviet Union, and then Red Terror was allowed to continue killing, tens of millions of more people after the war. So anyways, destruction generally comes from within. That's what's happening to America right now. Nobody was able to take us down from the outside. It had to be done from the inside, change our culture, change our morality, and this happened slowly over time, right? And we, the American people, let it happen. So I'm not here to blame the Freemasons who took us down from within, the Jews who took us down from within. I don't blame them. I blame us for letting these people take us down from within. And so that's exactly what's happening in this story. Christ and God, I think, are showing us that your end will generally come from behind. The dagger comes from behind. It's generally never the people in front of you. Your enemies keep you sharp. Your enemies keep you on your toes. You almost never let your enemies get behind you. The people who get you, whether you're Julius Caesar, Brutus is going to get you. Jesus, Judas is going to get you. In the story of Samson and Delilah, the woman he loved is the one who took him down. And that's how God generally brings a powerful person or a powerful empire down. It's always from within. Within every empire lies the seeds of their own destruction. They plant the seeds of their own destruction. And very important that it's the Jews that are arresting Christ in this story. And so Christ is betrayed with a kiss. And Judas is calling Rabbi, Rabbi. Here it's written Master, Master, but it would be Rabbi, Rabbi. Christ was not a rabbi. He told people not to call him Rabbi. And Judas, I think, was the only apostle who didn't call him Lord. So Judas is working for the Jews. And this is now where Peter is going to take out his sword and strike one of the guards. But the Romans are not in the picture right now, and they're now going to bring Jesus to the Romans. And Christ is not... Now, understand something. If Jesus was a homosexual, child trafficking drug dealer, he would be charged with sorcery, pharmakia. He would be charged with homosexuality. Christ would be... The Jews would not need to go to the Romans to have him killed. Christ would have been in violation of laws of the Torah, Mosaic law, and he could have been brought to justice by the customs of the Jews. The Jews never put him on trial for homosexuality, for drugs, nothing that they could have. Those carry the death penalty in the Torah. He's being put on trial for sedition, calling himself, or at least being accused of calling himself King of the Jews. He never called himself, I'm the King of the Jews. Okay, that's what everyone else called him. Okay, the Jews make it clear, we have no other king but Caesar. This guy's calling himself King of the Jews. Sedition. That's what leste means. It's an insurrectionist. It's a terrorist against the state. Okay, so now that's what's happening here. Okay, so if this was true, if Ammon Hillman and the pagans were telling the truth, the priests would not need to bring him to the Romans and say, hey, you need to crucify this guy because he's calling himself King of the Jews and we have no other king but Caesar. Okay. So, and Jesus answered and said unto them, are you come out as against a leste, a thief, with swords and with staves to take me? I was daily with you in the temple teaching, and you took me not. But the scriptures must be fulfilled. And then everyone forsakes Jesus. They all go in their own directions. But there was a young man out there, a Neaniskos, having a linen cloth on. It's 4 a.m. A guy, gets out of bed, hears the commotion, puts on a cloth, puts on a linen robe, goes out to see what's going on. Jesus is a celebrity at this point, so this guy's probably like, oh man, what's going on? And then other Neaniskos, the guards, arrest this guy, try to grab him, and he runs away. And as they grab him, they grab hold of the robe, he throws the robe off and chooses to run away naked. That's the story, guys. That's all that's happening here. Spoiler alert, okay? But we're going to break down each of these words starting with leste, and you're going to see, guys, even look, the debate's over just by looking at this word here, Neaniskos. And this is the young man they're accusing of being a sex slave of some sort that Jesus is prostituting. And they're saying he's a young boy, young pre-puberty boy. But look at the men arresting him. The guards are also called Neaniskos. It's the same Greek word. It's saying this Neaniskos was almost arrested by these Neaniskos. So I guess according to the pagans and Ammon Hillman, the captains of the guards, the scribes, the chief priest, all of these guys were also prepubescent children. That's it. You have to follow this logic. So the debate's over here. We're still going to go through with it. All right, so we're going to look at this word leste, and we're going to look at a Old Testament example, Book of Ezekiel. And what's it going to say here? The men were robbers, leste, among you, so that they shed blood among you. Now, does that sound like a robber? Does that sound like a thief? Or does it sound like something bigger? Something like that's a murderer to me. So it is perplexing for me why the translators felt, we're just going to translate this word leste as thieves and robbers. Yeah, guys, a thief could be a murderer. Like my friend, I had friends that lived in Brazil, and I would get scared when they told me their stories. Generally in Canada, the US, maybe now it's more normal for thieves to be murderers. But generally, when I was growing up in the 90s, okay, your house gets robbed, no one gets killed. And a lot of times when people are robbing you, the person getting robbed will just give you their stuff peacefully. Oh, dude, all right, you need money? Here, just take it. Now it's getting a little bit more crazy, but in Brazil, like they got bars on their windows and stuff like that. And in environments like that, robbers, when they rob a home and people are home, they generally do kill everyone in the house. You know, that's according to my friends who live there. So they all have bars on their windows. They got gated houses and stuff like that. So in this context, yeah, like robbers can be murderers if they're like that ruthless. But generally, a robber's not a murderer. It's a different charge. It's a different crime. Okay, so maybe back then it was more like how my Brazilian friends described their town in Brazil. And that's why a robber could be very synonymous with a thief, or, you know, why Leste is translated like that. But there's a difference between a thief, robber, and a murderer, right? So here's another example. And Jesus answered and said, now we're talking about the Good Samaritan here. So a certain man went down from Jerusalem to Jericho and fell among Leste. Okay, among thieves, it's translated, which stripped him of his raiment and wounded him and departed, leaving him half dead. See, this doesn't sound like a thief to me in the modern world. This sounds like a murderer. His intention is to steal. So yes, he's also a thief. But this guy's willing to kill the person in order to steal from him. So I would more classify this as an attempted murder, a murder, because he wanted to take something from the guy. The being a thief part is secondary. Being a murderer, attempted murderer, a guy committing assault and violence, a battery, that takes priority over the stealing, in my opinion. Okay, so here in this story, the violent criminal who's attacking this guy on the street is a Leste, okay? So now we're going to look at the two men crucified next to Christ. Then there were two thieves, again, interesting choice, thieves, crucified with him, one on the right hand and another on the left hand, okay? So the two guys next to Christ are also Leste, okay? But let's take a closer look now. Now, if you remember the story, there's the scapegoat, the Barabbas is offered. The Romans offer the Jews, you have a custom that I should release unto you one prisoner for the Passover, okay? And then he says, now look very carefully what's written. Will you therefore that I release unto you the King of the Jews? Why? Because he's being charged with sedition. He's being charged as a Leste. Because that's generally what the word Leste means. They're insurrectionists. They're terrorists, enemies of the state. Very important. Then they cried all again, saying, no, not this man, but Barabbas. Now Barabbas was a what? He was a Leste, translated as robber. No, that is not what Barabbas was. He was not just a robber. The two men on the cross were not just robbers. The story of the Good Samaritan, where they were willing to kill the guy to get his stuff, they were not just robbers. In Ezekiel, it very clearly said these people were willing to shed blood. They shed blood. It's not just a robber. This is something much deeper, okay? Now let's look at Mark. The next chapter from the chapter we're studying. What does it say about Barabbas? And there was one named Barabbas, which lay bound with them that had made insurrection, and with him who had committed murder in the insurrection. So I don't understand why John, in the translators felt, we're just going to translate it as robber, as if robber is the same as murderer. It's a step further, though. He didn't just commit murder, he murdered a guy in an insurrection against Rome. Barabbas was a terrorist. He was a guerrilla fighter, part of a zealot organization probably a Sicarii. We'll talk about the Sicarii in a second. So he's not just some robber. He's not just some Leste. He's an insurrectionist murderer. He is a threat to the Roman Empire. He is probably a serious Jewish national who is very anti-Greco-Roman. Okay, and he's probably killing people in festivals and in the crowds. He's an insurrectionist, guys. And here's Jesus, same time, Jesus too is being charged with insurrection. He's not an insurrectionist, but that's the trumped up charges that are laid upon Christ. You've come at me as if I'm a Lestes, like a criminal, an insurrectionist, a terrorist. But I was with you every day. You guys, why are you arresting me now at 4 a.m. when I was with you all the time? Like, what are my charges here? Okay. Barabbas. Now, how do we know what's going on here? Well, it's this word here, insurrection, stasis. Okay, so this word is telling us exactly what's going on. Insurrection, an uproar. And, it's to make a stand. Okay, anything with this word stasis, In Roman and Greek, generally, words that begin with sta, like statue, it doesn't move. His stasis, he's making a stand, right? A stand doesn't move. A stable doesn't move. A statue, a stadium, static electricity, something static doesn't move. So that's what Barabbas is being described as he's making a stand. This is his position. He's not moving on it. He's willing to kill for it, okay? So he's committing insurrection, a stasis against the ruling Romans in that region, and he's willing to kill for it, and that's why he's a Leste. He's not a Leste because he stole something. That's not what it says here. So if we were to look at Josephus, when the Jews finally went all out, 40 years after the crucifixion, or 36 years after the crucifixion, you have the Jews declaring war on the Roman Empire. And now they're a state in rebellion. They're now, as a state, as a nation, committing stasis. They're all insurrectionists now. They're a Leste province. Okay, that's what they are now. So when Jerusalem, as we read here from Josephus, when Titus and Vespasian, Titus was still at Alexandria assisting his father Vespasian to consolidate the empire which God had newly placed in their hands. It happened that the stasis in Jerusalem, okay, the uproar, the insurrection, having reached its peak, became three-parted. Now that's very important because, off topic a bit, but the book of Revelation also talks about this stasis. The book of Revelation says the great city was divided into 3 parts, okay? And the cities of the nations fell, and great Babylon came into remembrance before God to give unto her the cup of the wine of the fierceness of his wrath. Okay, so judgment is about to come on Jerusalem. The Jews, book of Revelation talks about how Jerusalem was parted into 3. Josephus confirms this. This is a 1st century, I'm just adding, book of Revelation is a 1st century parable talking about a prophecy of the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. Okay, and so now, stasis. Now at this point, the Jews are all Leste. They are in an uproar against the Roman Empire. Okay, so that's what's going on here. Barabbas is translated as a Leste, a robber, but in Mark it clarifies that he's actually a murderer who was in an insurrection, an uproar, a violent demonstration against the Roman Empire, and so he is a Leste. And he's a murderer. So I don't know why they would write, he's just a robber. It's not the same thing in my book. All right, so now we're going to look at the rise of the Sicarii. We're going to go back to Josephus. And so now what it's saying in Josephus is, when the country was thus cleared, another species of bandits, leston, cropped up in Jerusalem called Sicarii, daggermen, who committed murders in broad daylight and in the middle of the city. So this is fitting the description of Barabbas. Barabbas was in an insurrection. He was charged with murder. Barabbas was very likely a Sicarii, okay? But what are they? They're a new type of Leste. They're not like other Leste. These guys are willing to kill, and commit murder in broad daylight in the middle of festivals. Okay, so yeah, so in this passage of Josephus, right, he describes the chaotic governorship of the Roman procurator Felix. The text outlines a transition in the Jewish resistance against Rome. He calls them Sicarii. The name is after the Sika, the short dagger. Unlike the rural Leste, who fought openly, these men were urban terrorists. They assassinated their political enemies in broad daylight, specifically during festivals when crowds were thick. Okay, sources for Josephus, okay, and you can see the word leston, bandit, it's translated here as banditi, okay, bandits, it's more than just a robber. Fortress of Masada. So now we're going to look here in Josephus, talking about Simon ben Gioris and then Eleazar ben Yair. So in this story, but when an army was sent against him, against Simon by Ananias and the rulers, he fled to the Leste in Masada. So this is, I think, before the Romans have arrived. This is the same insurrections, the Jewish-Roman wars. The Jews are now full on Leste to the Romans, but now Jerusalem's divided into a three-way civil war, so the provisional government, the main government of priests and elders, are now fighting not just the Romans who are coming, they're fighting factions of terrorists, of Leste, of zealots. And Simon ben Gioris is one of the generals who is now fleeing to Masada to meet, I think, with Eleazar ben Yair, who is the commander of the Masada faction that went in by treachery and killed all the Romans, before they didn't declare war on the Romans. They just started killing them all. And so here he's running to the Leste, to the bandits, to the insurrectionists, the terrorists. Okay, that's where he's running to. Okay, so when Josephus speaks of the Leste at Masada, he explicitly describing a paramilitary force occupying a fortress and fighting a civil war, not common thieves or sex traffickers. The text records that the general Simon bar Giora fled to the Leste for military alliance. Therefore, when Jesus asked in the gospel, "Have you come out against me, against a Leste?" he is effectively asking, "Do you view me as a rebel commander leading an insurrection, like Simon ben Gioris or Simon bar Gioris?" Does that make sense, guys? King of the Jews, we have no king but Caesar. That's really what's going on in this story. They couldn't charge Jesus with the Torah. They had no grounds legally to charge Christ. And so, well, if we can't get him with the Torah, well, let's throw him before the Romans and charge him with insurrection, a leste, like Barabbas, the insurrectionist murderer. All right, so sources for Josephus, Jewish wars. Now we're going to look at Plutarch. We're going to just look at some Greco-Roman examples here. And Plutarch is writing about, in the life of Timoleon, talking about tyrants in Sicily, on the island of Sicily. And in this story, you have a tyrant named Maiamarchus, who is the tyrant of a city called Catana, which is probably about halfway between Syracuse and Messina. And so on the eastern coast of Sicily, in the north of Syracuse, in the southeast corner, you have Syracuse. Just north, you have Catana. And this tyrant of Catana is going to be a pretty evil guy, evil to the people, a traitor to his country, traitor to his people, and I think he's even willing to go to the Carthaginians for help in enslaving his people. And then we've got Timoleon, who is a Corinthian general who comes along and wins the day, defeats the evil tyrant, and that's it. And what do we know about this story? Well, in this story, when Maiamarchus is brought to Syracuse, okay, so when he is brought, attempting to rehearse his speech, However, he was not as fortunate as to die this way, so he tried to kill himself a couple different times, and it didn't work. But in the end, he was crucified like a robber. Look, the Greeks didn't really, for them to kill you for stealing bread or something like that is actually pretty ridiculous. The Greeks were not like that. The Romans weren't really like that. Crucifixion was reserved for the worst of the worst of the worst of the worst. Okay, and so he's killed for treason. Okay, so Mamercus, as a head of state, he was a wealthy, powerful man who commanded fleets and armies. The logic: if leste means sex trafficker, then Plutarch is claiming that the dictator of Catana was executed for running a trafficking ring. That is historically illiterate. Okay, he was executed for tyranny and for treason. Okay, he rose up in opposition. He was a violent dictator who tried to seize power and lost, and then had to pay the price. And he was crucified like a leste, not a robber or a thief. Okay, that's not. I don't know why there was using this translation. Maybe because in English we don't really have. I mean, we do insurrectionist, traitor, something like that. I would say he was crucified like a traitor for treason. That's more or less what it was. Okay, so that's Plutarch, Life of Timoleon. And now we're going to look at the Mithridatic Wars with Pompey the Great. Now the pirates, notice this, it's not translated as robbers or thieves. They're going to do pirates. Okay, so a leste is also a pirate. Again, it's going to be the context, I guess, that tells you how they're going to translate it. But I don't agree with the way they're translating robber. All right. So even attacked the shores. So the pirates, the lestes, attacked the shores of Italy itself with impunity and seized some women from noble families and who were traveling on the coast of the road, and 2 praetors with their insignia of office. Now, are the pirates in this story kidnapping and trafficking anybody? No. They're kidnapping and trafficking prominent people that they can use as hostages because they are at war with the Roman state. Mithridates was a king of Pontus. So Pontus would have been a Greek kingdom in Asia Minor, in northern Turkey along the Black Sea. And Mithridates was at war with the Romans and contracted these leste, these pirates, to attack the Roman Empire. So can a leste be a trafficker? Well, yeah, these leste are taking hostages. They're at war with Rome. They're being paid as mercenaries to fight the Romans for King Mithridates. And they are kidnapping Romans and Roman women, prominent ones, high-level ones, not just anybody. And they're using them as tools in the war and negotiations. Does that make sense? So, can a leste be a trafficker? Yeah, they can. If they're so can a soldier. So can if you capture someone in war, right? It's war. It doesn't mean you're not naturally a trafficker. If you capture a spy, you can use that spy as a bargaining chip against. So that's all this is. These guys, their crime as lestes is they are at war with the state. They are attacking, they are bandits, they're criminals, they are rebels, they are insurrectionists. They are like Barabbas. Okay? And now in this story, so in Appian's Mithridatic Wars, the Cilician pirates, the leste, stop behaving like mere sea robbers and start acting like an invading army. They realize Rome is weak and distracted, so they launch direct amphibious assaults on the Italian mainland. And now Pompey in this, how does he deal with these leste? He doesn't crucify them. When Caesar is abducted by leste, and these leste, these bandits, these terrorists, pirates, sell Caesar. Caesar promises them that I'm going to come back and crucify all of you, and he does. How Caesar dealt with the leste in his story, who captured him and ransomed him off. he went back and killed them all. Pompey is a little different. In Pompey's story, Pompey actually recognized something in these pirates and offered them land and work, and now had a group of trained bandits and soldiers and professionals that he then situated, made a deal with them that they just needed work, they needed jobs, they didn't like what they were doing, and used them to his advantage and actually made a deal with them. That's how he dealt with these Leste. Pompey the Great, to me, in a lot of ways, I do think was superior to Caesar. And yeah, anyways, well, that's a whole other topic. We won't talk about that now, but anyways, that's an example of, so yeah, can a Leste traffic people? Well, yeah, they can, but that's not, Barabbas was not a guy trafficking people. He was a guy killing people. So just because it's something a Leste can do, it's what a bandit, robber, or criminal can do. It's like, are you guys getting where I'm going with this? I can call 5 different guys criminals and put them all in prison, and one of the guys gets killed in prison. Well, why? Well, the first criminal was a drug dealer. He was dealing pot. The second guy, was a jaywalker. He walked across the street at a time he shouldn't have. The third guy, was a bank robber. He was committing bank fraud, and then you go through the list, the other guy is in jail for beating up a guy who, raped his little sister. And the 5th guy that got killed was the guy who actually raped the little girl. You see, they're all criminals, but are you going to hold the weed dealer, the bank fraud guy, to the same standard? Are you going to put him in the same category as the child rapist? No. So you can be a Leste and be a robber. You can be a Leste and be a thief. You can be a Leste and be a murderer. You could be a Leste and be a hostage negotiator. But being a Leste doesn't automatically make you those things. You have to read the context. Pirates, Leste, these pirates on the sea, yeah, they're probably plunderers. They're probably rapists. They're probably traffickers. But it doesn't make all of them those things. Does that make sense to you guys? That's like what a Leste is. Okay, some Leste, Spartacus is a Leste. The great slave revolution with Spartacus, when the slaves, the gladiators, rebelled against the Roman state. That's a Leste. They're fighting for their freedom. They're done being gladiators and fighting for the entertainment of people, and they launch a slave revolt against the state. It doesn't make them rapists. It doesn't make them murderers. It makes them guys fighting the state for their own freedom, and yet they're Leste. So it's not so simple. Okay? All right, so here's the Mithridatic Wars by Appian, and now we're going to move to just the conclusion. Okay, so Josephus uses the term to describe the Sicarii, a faction of urban terrorists and political assassins who murdered enemies in broad daylight during festivals, clearly defining them by their political violence rather than illicit trade. Appian describes the Cilician Leste not as mere criminals, but as a naval force capable of amphibious assaults and capturing Roman praetors, behaving like an invading army rather than a criminal ring. Plutarch applies the term to Mamercus, the head of state and dictator. It is historically illiterate to suggest a wealthy tyrant commanding armies was executed for running a sex trafficking ring when he was executed for tyranny and treason. Barabbas, the Barabbas link. While John 18:40 calls Barabbas a Leste, Mark 15:7 explicitly clarifies that he was bound with rebels who committed murder during the insurrection, stasis. Okay, this parallels the Leste with political revolutionaries and murder, not trafficking. I bet you the 2 guys that were on the cross dying with Jesus, those were Barabbas's friends. They were insurrectionists. They were Leste. He's a Leste. They're a Leste. Christ gets taken down. Barabbas gets taken down, and Christ goes in his stead. The guy who should have been killed for treason, sedition, insurrection, who was a murderer, committing stasis, is taken off the cross and Christ is put on, because the Jews wanted it that way. Okay? Violent highwaymen in Luke 10:30, the lestes are defined by the act of stripping and wounding a traveler, leaving him half dead. This describes violent highway robbery, distinct from the kidnapping and selling of persons implies by trafficking, right? Or implied by trafficking. So if Leste was a human trafficker, why did they almost kill the Good Samaritan, take all his stuff, and just leave him there to die? It's because they're not trafficking. Those guys are murderers. They're robbers. They're thieves. They could be charged with assault and maybe attempted murder or second-degree murder if the guy died. But you can't call them traffickers. You can't call them pedophiles. You can't call them those things. They're leste, but they're not traffickers. In Ezekiel 22:9, associates men who are robbers, andres lestes, but with shedding blood and unholiness, again emphasizing lethal violence over commerce. So it's not just, they're not just robbing, they're not just robbers, they're violent people, okay? So to translate lestes as child trafficker requires ignoring the primary definition found in these texts, whether referring to the Sicarii assassins in Jerusalem, the naval forces of Cilicia, or the insurrectionist Barabbas. The word leste consistently identifies people involved in armed conflicts, sedition, and violent robberies, okay? So that is the first word, leste, thief. Was Christ crucified between two thieves? No. Was Barabbas a thief? No. Was Christ saying, I'm a human child sex trafficker? Is that what you're accusing me of? No. That is where the pagans want it to be. That is where Amon Hillman and his delusions, that's what they want it to be. That's how they want to look at Christ. Now think about the dice they're throwing. You know, there's a joke from the Soviet Union, a Jewish joke, or at least it's about a Jewish boy. And I might have said this joke before, but there's a Jewish boy sitting in class, and they're in an atheist environment, you know, no God in the Soviet Union. And the teacher says to the class, I want everyone to give the middle finger to God. So everyone gives the middle finger to God, waves their hands in the air. But one little Jewish boy just ignored it and continued working. And the teacher lost it. Started yelling at him, Moishe, why didn't you give God the middle finger? And Moishe's like, well, if God isn't real like you say, why would I waste the energy? And if he is real, why would I risk ruining the relationship? So Moishe, I think, maybe he's real, maybe he's not. It's like, what is it? Is it Pascal's wager? You have a 50-50 chance there is a God. But if there isn't a God, okay, you're right. But if there is a God, you have a lot more to lose. So the only thing I want to mention right now is to slander God and Christ. Like, what if you are wrong? What if the Bible is actually right? And you spent your life lying, scheming and scamming, inventing lies, inventing stories, deceiving people with tricks of words. Amon Hillman is actually a trickster. He's a liar. He's actually a really sick man. And now what he's done is he's perpetuated this lie. And now there's a whole group of anti-Christian neo-pagans who use this and pass on this slander. It's just total nonsense. So we're going to continue, and we're going to look at the next couple words. And again, it's already ended here. We're going to go over Neoniskos next. Anyways, guys, I think we're going to end there. And so we're going to try to stop this lie. The lie has gone halfway around the world, so let's let the truth put on its shoes, all right? So I need to thank everybody for donating. thank you guys so much. You guys are keeping me going, keeping me alive. And I promise you, I'm not going to forget you guys. There are books coming. I can start. I'm hopefully at the end of February. The first one will be ready to go. Now I can finally get an ISBN number. I couldn't get an ISBN number before. I've been without a legal address for like 4.5 years. So I finally, in the next 2 weeks, I should have my legal address. I will be legal. I'll have ID for the first time in 4 years. So I'm really excited. All right. So in case I lose this channel, guys, there's Odysee. You can subscribe there. I now have an Instagram account. I'm not uploading there yet. I will. Instagram seems to be... I didn't even know I could have one. All right, so now I got one, and we'll see what I can upload there. It'll probably be PG-13 stuff. You can find me on Twitter, guys. There's a Telegram group and all that great stuff. So I think we're done. We're going to end there, and we're going to continue with the word neaniskos and then syndon. All right. So again, look, guys, thank you so much for watching. Thanks for all your support. Your messages, everything, really, it means the world to me. And yeah, so thanks guys. Thanks for watching, and I hope you guys are well.